The lockdown alarm wasn't supposed to be real, but when the threat became genuine, the school security guard's response shocked everyone. Because David Rodriguez didn't just follow standard procedures, he immediately began implementing tactical protocols with the precision of someone who had spent 12 years as a SWAT team leader, turning a potential tragedy into a masterclass in crisis management. Lincoln High School was having what everyone thought would be a routine Tuesday morning. Students shuffled between classes, teachers prepared for their next lessons, and in the main office, Principal Sarah Martinez was reviewing the day's schedule. At 10:15 a.m., they had planned a lockdown drill, just another required safety exercise that everyone hoped they'd never need to use for real. David Rodriguez had been the school security guard for 2 years. At 45, he was the kind of presence that made both students and staff feel safe without being intimidating. He knew every student's name, helped with everything from lost textbooks to minor disputes, and had never once raised his voice or lost his temper. The kids liked him. Teachers respected him. Parents felt confident knowing he was there. But what none of them knew was that David Rodriguez had spent the 12 years before coming to Lincoln High doing something very different, leading the city's elite SWAT team through some of the most dangerous situations law enforcement could face. As David made his morning rounds, checking doors and greeting early arriving teachers, he moved with a calm efficiency that most people mistook for simple diligence. They didn't recognize the tactical awareness, the constant assessment of sight lines and escape routes, the way his eyes automatically identified potential threats and safe zones. To everyone at Lincoln High, David was just their reliable security guard. They had no idea that the man ensuring their daily safety had once been responsible for resolving hostage situations, armed standoffs, and crisis scenarios where one wrong decision could cost lives. At exactly 10:15 a.m., the lockdown alarm sounded throughout Lincoln High. Students and teachers began following the familiar routine. Lights off, doors locked, everyone quiet and out of sight. It was supposed to be a 20-minute exercise, followed by the all-clear signal and a return to normal classes. But at 10:18 a.m., Principal Martinez's radio crackled with a message that changed everything. "This is not a drill," came the urgent voice from the district office. "We have reports of an armed individual in the vicinity of Lincoln High, implementing real lockdown protocols immediately." In classrooms throughout the building, teachers who, moments before, had been casually supervising a routine drill suddenly realized their students' lives might actually be in danger. Some froze. Others began to panic quietly, trying not to alarm their students while fighting their own terror. But in the main hallway, David Rodriguez was doing something entirely different. The moment the radio announcement ended, David's entire demeanor shifted. The friendly, approachable security guard disappeared, replaced by someone who moved with tactical precision and spoke in the crisp, controlled tone of a command professional. "Control, this is Rodriguez," he said into his radio, using a voice that teachers later said they didn't recognize. "Implementing Code Black protocols. I need eyes on all entry points and a status report on the potential threat." Code Black? Teachers looked at each other in confusion. That wasn't in any school manual they'd ever seen. Within 60 seconds of the real lockdown announcement, David Rodriguez had transformed Lincoln High School into something that looked more like a military operation than an educational institution. But instead of creating panic, his calm authority was having the opposite effect. "Mrs. Patterson," he said to a third-grade teacher who was struggling to keep her students quiet, "take your class to the interior storage room. No windows, solid walls, single point of entry that I can monitor." As he moved through the building, David was implementing what law enforcement calls tactical facility management, turning a vulnerable school building into a defensive position while keeping everyone calm and safe. "Mr. Johnson," he instructed the gym teacher, "I need you to move your students to the locker room area. If anyone asks, Tell them we're being extra careful, nothing more." What amazed veteran teachers like Margaret Foster, who had been at Lincoln for 15 years, was how David seemed to know exactly what to do without consulting any manual or calling for outside guidance. He was running the lockdown like someone who had done this before, not as a school security guard, but as someone with much more serious training. "I've never seen anything like it," she would later tell her husband. "He turned our school into some kind of fortress in 5 minutes, but he did it so smoothly that the kids weren't even scared." David was in constant radio communication with police dispatch, but teachers noticed he wasn't just receiving information. He was giving it. Detailed assessments of the building's security status, recommendations for approaching vehicles, tactical suggestions that sounded like they came from someone with serious law enforcement experience. As the lockdown stretched past 30 minutes, the stress was beginning to show on everyone except David Rodriguez. While teachers whispered nervously to each other and students started asking questions, David moved through the building with the same calm competence he'd shown from the first moment. "How does he know all this?" whispered math teacher Tom Bradley to his colleague. "This isn't school security training. This is something else entirely." At 11 a.m., police units began arriving at Lincoln High. Teachers expected David to step back and let the professionals take over. Instead, they watched through windows as he met the police commander at the main entrance and began what looked like a tactical briefing. Inside classroom 205, history teacher Jennifer Walsh could hear David's voice through the intercom system as he coordinated with law enforcement. But the language he was using, perimeter secured, all assets accounted for, recommend tactical approach from the north entrance, wasn't the vocabulary of a school security guard. "Who is this guy?" she wondered aloud. The answer came from an unexpected source. Officer Mike Chen, one of the responding police units, had worked with David Rodriguez before, not at Lincoln High, but during his previous career. When Chen spotted David coordinating the school's response, he immediately radioed his supervisor. "Commander," Chen said, "the security guard running this operation is David Rodriguez. He used to lead our SWAT team. If he's in charge of that building, those kids are in the safest hands possible." By 11:30 a.m., the potential threat had been identified and neutralized, a confused individual with mental health issues who had never actually entered school property. But the lockdown had revealed something extraordinary about Lincoln High's security guard. As students were released back to their normal activities and teachers began processing what they had witnessed, Principal Martinez called David into her office. She had questions that couldn't wait for the formal debriefing. "David," she said, "what I saw today, that wasn't standard school security training." David looked at her with the same steady expression he'd worn during the entire crisis. For 2 years, he had successfully maintained his quiet, low-profile existence at Lincoln High. But today's emergency had stripped away any possibility of continuing that pretense. "No, ma'am," he said simply. "It wasn't." "You've done this before. Not school lockdowns, real tactical situations." David nodded slowly. 12 years as a SWAT team leader, 215 operations, hostage rescues, armed standoffs, building searches. I retired 3 years ago. Principal Martinez felt her breath catch. The man who had been quietly watching over their school, helping students with homework and breaking up minor scuffles, was one of the most elite law enforcement professionals the city had ever produced. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because," David said, "I wanted to be just a security guard. I wanted a job where I could help people without—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Without the stakes being life and death every single day." Later that afternoon, as Lincoln High returned to its normal routine, David sat in his small security office thinking about the career he had left behind. 12 years as a SWAT team leader had been an honor and a burden that few people could truly understand. He had led teams into situations where split-second decisions determined whether families were reunited or destroyed. He had talked armed suspects into surrendering when negotiation was the only thing standing between violence and peace. He had been responsible for the safety of his team members, innocent civilians, and even the suspects they were trying to apprehend. The success rate of David's SWAT team had been unprecedented. 215 operations with 0 civilian casualties and only 3 officer injuries, none of them serious. But success in that world came with a psychological cost that accumulated over years of high-stakes operations. The final case had been a school shooting threat at a middle school across town. David's team had resolved the situation successfully. No shots fired, suspect in custody, all children safe. But as he walked through those school hallways afterward, seeing the faces of terrified kids who would remember that day for the rest of their lives, David realized he wanted to be part of the solution in a different way. "I spent 12 years responding to crises," he had told his wife that night. "Maybe it's time I spent some years preventing them." 2 weeks after the lockdown incident, Principal Martinez called David into her office again. This time, she wasn't alone. The district superintendent was there, along with the head of school safety for the entire county system. "David," the superintendent said, "what happened at Lincoln High has been discussed at every level of our administration. The way you handled that situation, we'd like to offer you a position as our district's Director of School Safety." It was a significant promotion, better pay, more responsibility, the chance to implement safety protocols across dozens of schools. David would be able to use his SWAT training to protect thousands of students instead of just the 800 at Lincoln High. But as he looked around the small office where he had spent 2 peaceful years, David realized something important about what he really wanted. "I appreciate the offer," he said finally, "but I'd like to stay here." "Here?" The superintendent looked confused. "As a security guard?" "As Lincoln High's security guard," David clarified. "These kids know me. Their parents trust me. The teachers rely on me. I spent 12 years being responsible for entire operations. Now I want to be responsible for this school." Principal Martinez smiled. She had hoped that would be his answer. "However," David continued, "I would like to help train other school security personnel. Share some of what I've learned. Make sure that if another school faces what we faced, they're as prepared as possible." The superintendent nodded. "That's something we can definitely arrange." 6 months later, David Rodriguez was still the security guard at Lincoln High School, but he had also become something more, a trainer and consultant who helped school security teams across the state prepare for situations they hoped would never occur. On weekends, David taught courses in crisis management, threat assessment, and emergency response to school safety personnel. He helped develop protocols that turned standard security guards into protectors who could think tactically while maintaining the calm, approachable presence that schools needed. But the most important part of David's new role happened every morning when he walked through Lincoln High's hallways, greeting students and teachers who now saw him a little differently. They still appreciated his friendly manner and reliable presence, but they also carried the quiet confidence that came from knowing their school was protected by someone with extraordinary skills. "Mr. Rodriguez," called out sophomore Maria Santos as she hurried to class. "My mom wanted me to thank you again for what you did during the lockdown." David smiled. "Just doing my job, Maria." But as he watched her disappear into her classroom, David reflected on how much his definition of his job had evolved. As a SWAT team leader, his job had been to resolve crises when they occurred. Now, his job was to create an environment where crises were less likely to happen in the first place. Today, Lincoln High School operates with a sense of security that goes beyond locked doors and surveillance cameras. Students learn in an environment protected by someone who understands both education and tactical operations, who can help with homework and handle genuine emergencies with equal competence. But David Rodriguez's story represents something larger than one school's security. It's about the thousands of former law enforcement and military professionals who have transitioned from high-stakes careers to quieter service roles, not because they were tired of protecting people, but because they found new ways to serve. The skills that made David Rodriguez an elite SWAT team leader didn't disappear when he became a school security guard. They evolved. The tactical awareness became situational awareness. The crisis management became conflict prevention. The command authority became quiet leadership. Sometimes the most effective protection comes not from the most visible security measures, but from the most unexpected guardians. David Rodriguez looks like a school security guard, acts like a school security guard, and serves as a school security guard. But underneath that approachable exterior is something that potential threats would never expect, and something that parents can trust completely. School safety isn't just about systems and procedures. It's about having the right person in the right place when it matters most. And sometimes that person is someone whose previous career prepared them for challenges that no parent wants to imagine and no school wants to face. What do you think? Have you ever encountered someone whose quiet job masked serious professional expertise? Someone who chose to serve in a different way after a high-stakes career? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe to the Veteran Chronicles for more stories of dedicated professionals who continue serving their communities in unexpected ways.